After the cherries, it's now the time to pick our apricots. Unlike the cherries, it's very easy to pick the apricots. All that you need to do is hold the apricot, give it a little twist, and it comes easily in your hand. Apricots are one of the most resilient stone fruit trees that you can grow on your farm. Now, why do I say that? I say that because apricots, along with the peaches, they bloom very early. Because they bloom very early, they are exposed to the late spring frost, which can potentially damage the flowers. But that has not happened. As far as the apricots and the peaches were concerned, there was no damage whatsoever. So we got about 14 to 15 different varieties of apricots on the farm, and we've been harvesting the early harvest varieties of our apricots like the Prisia apricot and the Wonder Cot since the 1st of June. And now this is the mid-harvest varieties of apricots which we're going to be harvesting from. This particular apricot in front of me is the Perimasi. The Perimasi, you'll notice, has a burgundy color to the skin. Most of the apricots are yellowish orange, but if you notice the Perimasi, it has a very distinct color. It has a burgundy color, a very bright, very reddish kind of a color, and these are extremely sweet to eat. Now I will sample one of these, and they are ready to harvest. By the way, this is the end of June and all of them are more or less ready to be picked and eaten straight off the branch. Straight off the branch, why? Because we are an organic farm. We can just pick the fruit and eat it off the branch. Very sweet. So this is the kind of variety, the Perimasi variety, a sweet variety, a sweet apricot that we're going to use for dehydration, that we're going to use for making jams. Now, along with the Perimasi variety of apricot, what is ready to harvest is this apricot called the Hollycot. Now the Hollycot, if you see, is much bigger and it has a very different color to the Perimasi, which was burgundy color, more reddish color. This has a very distinct yellowish red color that most apricots have. Now the distinct thing about the Hollycot apricot here is that the Hollycot apricot is not a self-fertile variety of apricot. There are two apricots we have on the farm which are not self-fertile. One is the Hollycot and the other one is the Fuego. But this is like the Perimasi, a mid-harvest variety of apricot, and they come into harvest together and they're going to be harvested now, today or tomorrow. And this is an apricot right next to the Hollycot. Is an apricot which you're going to harvest maybe towards the middle of July or the end of July, because as you can see, it's still raw, it's still ripening, it's still raw, and this particular variety is called the Delicot. Last year we had no production whatsoever from this tree, but this year, as you can see, this is loaded with the apricots. Delicot is a late harvest variety of apricot. Because this is a late harvest variety of apricot, this is going to be susceptible to the rains that the monsoon brings, and the monsoon brings a lot of rains and a lot of diseases along with it, and the potential cracking of the skin on the apricots can happen for all late harvest varieties of apricots. This is one, and there's another variety of apricot called the Pliacot. That's a very late harvest variety of apricot as well, which perhaps we might be harvesting towards maybe the first week of August. So Delsicot, Pliacot, and one or two more varieties are late harvest varieties, and they are going to be susceptible to skin cracking, which is caused by excess rain that the monsoon brings. And this one is another late harvest variety of apricot. As you can see, it's still green and it's still unripe, it's still raw, and it'll take a couple of weeks for it to ripen. This is the apricot with a very fancy name. It's called the Bella Dumella. This particular apricot has also given us the production for the first time ever. These apricot trees on a farm, like almost all other trees on the farm, were planted in 2022, 3 years ago almost, and they have come into sample production, I would call it. But as far as samples go, the production is pretty bumper. We have done a lot of thinning on these plants and we are happy with the production. And Bella de Mela was a plant which did not give us anything at all last year, no samples, nothing whatsoever. But this year, it's loaded with the apricots. Now this is a variety called the Bolero. The Bolero has not yet ripened, but this is not a very late harvest variety. Bolero is the apricot that we planted before any other apricot on the farm. So these trees were planted on the border, and they were planted in 2020, almost about 4 years ago, 4 to 5 years ago. And this has given us a steady harvest throughout the years. And this is the kind of apricot of choice for us, except that this is also going to be susceptible to the monsoon and the skin cracking that can potentially happen because of rainfall. And look at the size of these apricots. They are humongous. These trees have produced us the biggest apricots that we have on the farm. This particular variety is called the Pink Cot apricot. We have a variety over here called the Big Red, and I was assuming that Big Red will have the biggest apricots, but that's not the case. Pink Cot has the largest apricots that we have growing on any apricot tree on the farm. And they are also ready to be harvested, and we're going to harvest them along with the Perimasi and Hollycott. So the average apricot weighs in at about 65 grams or so, but the pink cot weighed in at 139 grams, almost double the size of an average apricot. And this is that big red apricot that I was talking about, and I was assuming because it's called the big red, the apricots are going to be big, and as you can see, these apricots are not as big as the pink cot apricot. Pink cot apricot has the largest apricots of all the varieties that we have on the farm, and we have almost about 15 plus varieties of apricots. So the apricots bloom very early, but not all apricots, not the late harvest varieties of apricots like this one over here called the Pliacot. So the Pliacot, the Delicot, and the other one called the Fuego, these three apricots are the late harvest varieties of apricots. They are not going to be susceptible to the frost. In any case, we saw this year, frost or no frost, nothing really happens to the very hardy apricots. But what's going to happen to the late harvest varieties of these apricots is that they're going to be certainly susceptible to the monsoon, to the rains, and the rains bring a lot of diseases, and rains also lead to the cracking of the skin of the stone fruit trees. So these are going to be susceptible to that. But what these late harvest varieties of apricots do for a harvest is they extend a harvest period. So we start harvesting our early harvest varieties of apricots like the Prissy apricot and the Wondercot towards the 1st of June, and these, the Pliacot, the Delicot, and the Fuego apricot are going to be harvested towards maybe the mid-August onwards. So we have an extended harvest period of our apricots, and that period is almost about 2 months. So most of the apricots are self-fertile, which means that they do not need cross-pollination to fertilize their flowers. But there are two varieties that we have on the farm which require cross-pollination. And these two varieties are one, the Hollycott that we saw earlier, and this is the second variety which requires cross-pollination. This is the Fuego variety, and this, as you can see, is also a raw apricot right now, and this is going to be harvested maybe 2 weeks to 3 weeks from now. Now look at the amount of apricots on this apricot tree, the variety called the Perimasi. The Perimasi variety is usually a very prolific bearer. They have this open center formation. As you can see, I'm standing right in the center, and all these branches are radiating in all the 4 directions. This because we want the center to be open for many reasons, because we want a good circulation of air in the center, and the trees become less susceptible to diseases, and all these branches radiating outside like that are going to be able to get full exposure to the sun, and they will also be accessible to us when we start harvesting. Today what we're going to do is we are going to calculate the amount of apricots that are on this very young 3-year-old Perimasi variety of apricot, and we are going to weigh them. So we are going to start the harvest now. So the tree is harvested. This was the Perimasi, a 3-year-old, very young apricot tree, very prolific bearing tree. As you can see, we got almost 3 baskets full, and I reckon it's almost about 15 to 20 kgs. We're going to take these baskets down and put them under the scale and check out what the exact weight is. And the weight was 26 kgs from one tree. So there's another variety which has the same color as the Perimasi, the burgundy color, a very unique color for the apricot. And this is the Rubista. Rubista, as you can see, is indistinguishable from Perimasi. They're exactly the same, the size is the same, the color is the same, similarity is really uncanny. So this is the Rubista apparently, the same color as the Perimasi. And this is the less glamorous apricot we have on the farm. This is called the white apricot, and locally we call it the white shakarpara. The best thing about this white apricot or the shakarpara is that you can pick it when it's still firm and raw, and it is still very sweet to eat. Extremely sweet, very juicy, and I reckon this is going to be an apricot of choice for dehydration, because for dehydration you need apricots which are inherently very sweet. So this is a very sweet apricot, very firm, still very raw. As you can see, it's still green, yellowish green, but extremely sweet to eat. And as far as the other apricots are concerned, you have to wait for them to become ripe before they become sweet. And this one is a unique apricot in that it's sweet even when it's still firm and still raw. So we have these different varieties of apricots, the early harvest varieties, the mid-season varieties, and the late harvest varieties of apricots, which extend the harvest period from the 1st of June towards the end of August, which means that these apricots are not going to come into bearing, are not going to come into harvest all at once. They're going to come into harvest, they're going to come into bearing at different times, giving farmers like me time to come and pick them at my convenience.